The vibration from Staff Sergeant Emma Reese's encrypted phone cut through the silence of her barracks room at Fort Benning, Georgia. She glanced at the screen, a number she didn't recognize, but the prefix told her everything she needed to know. JSOC. Joint Special Operations Command didn't call unless something critical was happening. Staff Sergeant Reese, she answered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her veins. Reese, this is Colonel Matthews, JSOC Operations. You have a FRAGO fragmentary order. Pack your gear. Your wheels up in 4 hours. The voice was clipped, professional, leaving no room for questions. Destination, sir. Afghanistan, FOB Atlas. That's all I can tell you over this line. Your orders are being transmitted now. This is classified at the highest level. Acknowledge. Acknowledged, sir. The line went dead. Emma sat motionless for exactly 3 seconds, allowing herself that brief moment to process. Then she moved. Her hands worked with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this dozens of times before. Her deployment bag was always ready. It was a habit she developed after her first combat tour. She pulled it from her locker and began adding the essentials: extra uniforms, hygiene kit, personal medical supplies, and the small waterproof notebook where she kept her range data and ballistic calculations. But the most important item sat in a locked hard case under her bed. Emma knelt and entered the combination: her father's birthday, a father who'd been a Marine Scout sniper in Desert Storm and who'd taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old. The Barrett M82 lay nestled in custom foam padding, disassembled and meticulously maintained. She'd carried this rifle through Helmand Province, through the Hindu Kush Mountains, through missions that still appeared in her dreams. The weapon wasn't just a tool. It was an extension of her will, a precision instrument that had saved lives and taken them when necessary. She ran her fingers along the barrel, checking for any imperfection she knew wouldn't be there. Satisfied, she secured the case and pulled out her second bag, the one containing her optics, range finder, ballistic computer, and the hand-loaded ammunition she trusted more than factory rounds. 4 hours later, Emma found herself on a C-130 Hercules transport plane, the only passenger among pallets of supplies bound for various bases across Afghanistan. The loadmaster, a staff sergeant who looked barely old enough to vote, offered her earplugs and a bottle of water before leaving her alone with her thoughts. She used the flight time the way she always did, mentally preparing. Emma pulled out her notebook and reviewed her data from the last qualification shoot. Groups at 1,500 meters, all within a 6-inch spread. She'd been shooting well lately, her body and mind in that rare state of perfect synchronization that separated good snipers from great ones. 12 hours, 2 refueling stops, and 1 transfer later, Emma's boots hit the tarmac at Bagram Airfield. The Afghan heat struck her like a physical force, even in the early morning hours. The air smelled of dust, jet fuel, and something else, the distinctive scent of a war zone, a mixture of burning trash and ancient earth that every veteran recognized instantly. A young lieutenant with Ranger tabs met her at the aircraft. Staff Sergeant Reese. "That's me." "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Carver. I'm your liaison to get you to FOB Atlas. We have a Black Hawk waiting." He eyed her rifle case with professional interest. "They said to expedite your movement. Whatever you're here for must be important." "I honestly don't know what I'm here for, Lieutenant," Emma replied, hoisting her bags. "I was just told to show up." The Black Hawk flight took another 90 minutes, following valleys and ridgelines to avoid potential threats. Emma watched the landscape pass below, mountains that had swallowed empires, villages unchanged for centuries, and the occasional burned-out vehicle marking where violence had erupted. She'd seen this terrain before, had operated in these mountains, but the land never lost its harsh beauty or its danger. FOB Atlas appeared as they crested a ridge, a collection of reinforced buildings, HESCO barriers and guard towers carved into a mountainside. The base was small, which meant it was either a logistics hub or a special operations forward operating point. Given her summons, Emma suspected the latter. The helicopter flared and landed in a cloud of dust. Emma jumped out, her bag secure, and moved quickly away from the rotor wash. A sergeant in Navy-type III camouflage uniforms waited at the edge of the landing zone, his bearing marking him as special operations even without the trident insignia on his chest. "Staff Sergeant Reese, follow me, the Admiral is waiting." "Admiral?" Emma's mind raced. Flag officers didn't typically involve themselves in individual soldier movements unless something significant was happening. She followed the SEAL through a maze of barriers and sandbag walls, noting the increased security, guards at every checkpoint, multiple layers of entry control, and the kind of hardened facilities that suggested this base dealt with sensitive operations. They arrived at a nondescript building with reinforced walls and a cipher-locked door. Inside, the temperature dropped 20 degrees thanks to industrial air conditioning units. The SEAL led her down a corridor and stopped at a conference room entrance. "They're waiting for you inside, Staff Sergeant. Good luck." He knocked twice and opened the door. Emma stepped into the room and felt every eye turn toward her. At least 15 men sat around a large table covered with maps, satellite imagery, and tactical planning materials. All of them wore the tan uniforms and insignia of Naval Special Warfare SEALs, some of the most elite warriors in the American military. And she, in her Army multicam, was clearly not part of their brotherhood. At the head of the table sat a man whose presence dominated the room. Rear Admiral Jackson Cole was in his early 50s, with iron-gray hair cut high and tight, a weathered face that spoke of decades in the field, and eyes that missed nothing. 3 rows of ribbons on his chest included the Navy Cross, multiple silver stars, and combat decorations from every major conflict of the past 30 years. Cole looked up from a personnel file, her file, Emma realized, and his expression hardened. The room fell silent. "Who the hell authorized this?" he demanded, his voice carrying the command authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. He slapped the file on the table hard enough that the sound echoed. "Someone explain to me why, in the middle of the most critical mission of the year, Command sends me a staff sergeant from Fort Benning instead of a SEAL sniper." Emma stood at attention, her face neutral, but her mind was already working. She'd faced skepticism before, from instructors who didn't think women belonged in sniper school, from conventional units who questioned special operations soldiers, from anyone who judged the cover before reading the book. She would let her skills do the talking. They always did. Admiral Cole's question hung in the air like a challenge. Emma remained at attention near the doorway, her face impassive, while the SEAL operators around the table shifted in their seats. Some looked curious, others skeptical, and a few appeared outright hostile to her presence. "At ease, Staff Sergeant," Cole said, though his tone suggested he was anything but at ease with the situation. "Take a seat." Emma moved to the only empty chair, positioned at the far end of the table away from the Admiral. She set her rifle case carefully against the wall, noting how several of the SEAL's eyes followed the Barrett's distinctive profile. As she sat, she quickly scanned the satellite imagery spread across the table, topographic maps of mountainous terrain, thermal imaging of a compound, and what appeared to be target photographs. Cole stood picking up a laser pointer. "Gentlemen and Sergeant, let me bring everyone up to speed. 3 weeks ago, intelligence identified a high-value target operating in the Kunar province." He clicked a remote, and a photograph appeared on the screen mounted on the wall. The image showed a bearded man in his 40s, wearing traditional Afghan clothing, his eyes cold and calculating. "This is Khalid Nazari, Taliban's senior commander. He's responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 provinces, including the IED network that killed 17 American soldiers in the past month alone." Cole's voice hardened. "He's also the architect behind the ambush of an SF team 2 weeks ago. 4 men didn't make it home because of him. The room's atmosphere grew heavier. Every man there had lost brothers in arms. This wasn't just another mission, it was personal. Cole advanced the slides, showing more images of Nazari meeting with other insurgents, receiving weapons shipments, and surveying terrain for future attacks. Our intelligence assets have been tracking him for months, but he's smart. He moves constantly, never sleeps in the same location twice, and surrounds himself with experienced fighters. Another click brought up a satellite image of a compound nestled in a mountain valley. Yesterday, we got a break. Nazari is meeting with 2 other high-level commanders at this location. Our sources confirm he'll be there for exactly 48 hours before moving again. This is our window. Emma leaned forward slightly, studying the topography. The compound sat in a natural fortress, steep mountains on 3 sides, a narrow valley approach that would be a killing zone for any ground assault, and what appeared to be multiple defensive positions. Now here's our problem, Cole continued, zooming in on the satellite image. The compound is heavily defended, 20 to 30 fighters at minimum, PKM machine guns, RPGs, and they've mined the approaches. A direct assault would result in unacceptable casualties, even for this target. He moved the laser pointer across the image, tracing a line from a ridge on the opposite side of the valley to the compound. The only viable option is a precision strike. We eliminate Nazari, then the assault team moves in to exploit the chaos and capture or kill the other commanders. One of the SEAL team leaders, a lieutenant commander with a thick beard and a scar across his cheek, spoke up. "Sir, what's the distance from the hide site to target?" 2,387 meters, Cole replied flatly. The room erupted in low whistles and muttered comments. Emma kept her expression neutral, but her mind was already working through the calculations. Nearly a mile and a half. At that distance, she'd need to account for significant bullet drop, wind deflection, the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation, and the air density changes from the altitude. It was an extreme-range shot, even for a .50 caliber round. Exactly, Cole continued. Which is why I've spent the past week contacting every qualified long-range precision shooter in theater. The Marine Scout sniper who made that 1,800-meter shot in Fallujah. He looked at the terrain and said the angle makes it impossible, too steep, too much vegetation blocking the line of sight. The Army Special Forces sniper from 3rd Group. He calculated the wind variance in that valley and said we'd need a miracle. Cole's eyes swept the room. I had a SEAL chief with 15 years of experience tell me that even if someone could make the shot, the window of opportunity is too narrow. Nazari only exposes himself for about 90 seconds when he steps onto the balcony for his morning prayers. 90 seconds to range, calculate, and fire. One chance. Miss, and he disappears for another 6 months while more Americans die. The Admiral turned his gaze directly to Emma, and she felt the weight of his scrutiny. So when command tells me they're sending the perfect shooter for this mission, I expect a SEAL with a proven record at extreme distance. Instead, I get, he gestured toward her, an Army staff sergeant I've never heard of. Emma met his eyes steadily, refusing to look away. She understood his concern. Lives depended on this shot, and he didn't know her capabilities. But she also knew her record spoke for itself, if only he'd actually read it. Staff Sergeant Reese, Cole said, his tone shifting to interrogation mode. Your file says you qualified as an Army sniper 3 years ago. What's your longest confirmed kill? 1,847 meters, sir. Helmand Province, 18 months ago. Confirmed by whom? 2 spotters and aerial surveillance, sir. Taliban weapons facilitator. The after-action report is classified, but it's in my jacket. Cole's eyes narrowed. Target was stationary or moving. Moving, sir, walking across a compound courtyard. A few of the SEALs exchanged glances. An 1,800-meter shot on a moving target was impressive. regardless of service branch. Mountain warfare experience, Cole continued. 14 months in the Hindu Kush, sir, operating at elevations between 6,000 and 12,000 feet. Familiar with the Barrett M82? Yes, sir. I've logged approximately 10,000 rounds through my weapon. Emma paused, then added, I hand-load my own ammunition to ensure consistency. Cole walked slowly around the table toward her, his expression unreadable. The M82 is a heavy weapon. How do you handle recoil management on extended operations? Proper position, sir, technique over strength, and I train with it constantly. How many failed shots have you had in combat? Emma didn't hesitate. 3, sir. 1 due to unexpected wind shift, 1 because the target moved behind cover during bullet flight time, and 1 because my spotter gave me incorrect range data. Cole seemed slightly surprised by her honesty. Most soldiers would have claimed perfection. The SEAL team leader who'd asked about distance earlier leaned toward Cole and whispered something. Emma couldn't hear the words, but she caught the skeptical expression, the subtle shake of his head. Cole nodded, then turned back to Emma. Staff Sergeant, I appreciate your service and your candor, but this mission requires absolute precision under the worst possible conditions. I can't risk American lives on an unknown quantity, regardless of what your file says. He moved toward the door. I'm going to contact command and request they send us someone with more experience at extreme range, someone whose capabilities I can verify. I'm sure you understand it's nothing personal. Emma stood smoothly, the movement precise and controlled. The sound of her chair pushing back stopped Cole mid-sentence. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Admiral, she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its measured tone. Permission to show you my weapon and credentials, sir. Something in her demeanor, the calm confidence, the absolute certainty, made Cole pause. He studied her face for a long moment, seeing something that made him reconsider. Finally, he gestured toward her rifle case. Granted, Staff Sergeant. Show me what you've got. Emma moved to her rifle case with deliberate precision, aware that every operator in the room was watching her every movement. She knelt beside the hard case, her fingers entering the combination lock with practiced ease. The metallic click seemed unnaturally loud in the silent briefing room. Before she could open it, Admiral Cole's voice cut through the tension. Staff Sergeant, before you show me your hardware, I have a few more questions. Emma's hands paused on the case. She looked up at Cole and nodded. Of course, sir. Cole crossed his arms, his posture that of a man who'd spent decades evaluating warriors under pressure. You mentioned hand-loading your ammunition. Walk me through your process for a 2,400-meter shot. What variables are you calculating? Emma stood, leaving the case closed for the moment. She moved to the satellite image on the table, her finger tracing the distance from the proposed hide site to the target compound. At that range, sir, I'd start with environmental factors. Temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure all affect air density, which changes bullet velocity and trajectory. I'd need current weather data and historical patterns for that valley to predict conditions during the mission window. She pointed to the elevation markers on the topographic map. The hide site appears to be at approximately 8,200 feet, while the target compound sits at 7,400 feet. That 800-foot elevation difference creates a downward angle that affects the bullet's path. Most shooters forget to account for the cosine of the angle. They calculate for the line-of-sight distance instead of the horizontal distance, which throws off their elevation adjustment. One of the younger SEALs leaned forward, genuinely interested now. Emma continued, her voice steady and confident. Then there's wind. In mountainous terrain, especially in valleys like this, you don't get consistent wind. You get thermals rising from the valley floor, downdrafts from the peaks, and crosswinds that can shift every 100 meters along the bullet's path. She traced the trajectory line with her finger. I'd need to observe the valley for hours, watching vegetation movement, dust patterns, mirage distortion through the scope. I'd build a wind map for different times of day. Cole's expression remained skeptical, but Emma noticed he'd uncrossed his arms, a subtle shift in body language. "What about the Coriolis effect?" he asked. At 2,387 meters, firing east to west in the northern hemisphere, the Coriolis effect would push the bullet right and slightly down, Emma replied without hesitation. The exact deviation depends on latitude. Here in Afghanistan, at approximately 35 degrees north, I'd calculate roughly 3.2 inches of horizontal drift. Not massive, but at extreme range, every inch matters. The SEAL team leader with the scar, Emma had noticed his name tape read Dalton, spoke up, his tone challenging. "That's textbook knowledge, Staff Sergeant. Any sniper can recite formulas. Making the shot under pressure is different. What's your cold bore accuracy?" Emma turned to face him directly. "My first shot from a cold barrel at 1,000 meters typically impacts within 2 inches of point of aim, Lieutenant Commander. I verify this monthly. At 2,000 meters, I'm within 6 inches. I can provide my range logs if you'd like to review them." "How many times have you engaged targets beyond 2,000 meters?" Dalton pressed. "In combat, twice, both successful eliminations. On the range, I shoot past 2,000 meters at least twice a month, conditions permitting." Another SEAL, a chief petty officer with graying hair, joined the interrogation. "The Barrett M82 is a beast, weighs 30 pounds loaded. How do you handle portability during infiltration to a hide site?" "Carefully, Chief," Emma replied with the slightest hint of a smile. "I break it down, distribute weight between myself and my spotter. I've carried it 12 miles through the Hindu Kush in full kit. It's heavy, but it's also the tool required for this specific job. You don't complain about the weight of a breaching charge when you need to make entry." The chief nodded slowly, acknowledging the logic. Cole circled around the table, his eyes never leaving Emma. "Let's talk about the shot itself. You've got 90 seconds from when the target appears to when he goes back inside. Factor in ranging, wind calculation, final adjustments. How do you manage that timeline?" "Preparation, sir," Emma said immediately. "Before the target appears, I've already ranged every significant landmark around the probable appearance point. I've been reading wind for hours, know the patterns. My rifle is pre-staged with my best calculated solution. When he appears, I'm confirming variables, not starting from zero. A good sniper spends hours preparing for seconds of action." "And if your calculations are wrong," Cole challenged, "if the wind shifts just as you fire, if there's a thermal draft you didn't predict, you miss, and our one chance to eliminate a man who's killing Americans evaporates." Emma's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in her professional composure. "Then I live with that failure for the rest of my life, sir. But I don't miss because I didn't prepare. I don't miss because I rushed. And I sure as hell don't miss because someone decided I couldn't make the shot before even giving me a chance." The room went completely silent. Emma had just challenged a flag officer, and every man present knew it. Cole's eyes flashed, but not with anger, with something else. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. "Bold words, Staff Sergeant," Cole said quietly. "Can you back them up?" "I wouldn't be here if I couldn't, sir." Dalton stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Admiral, with all due respect, we're wasting time. We have proven SEAL snipers who can make this shot. We don't need—" "What you need," Emma interrupted, then caught herself. "What the mission needs, Lieutenant Commander, is someone who can guarantee results. I understand your concern. You don't know me. You haven't worked with me. My uniform is different, and yes, I'm a woman in a field dominated by men. But none of that changes the fact that I can make this shot." Cole held up a hand, silencing Dalton before he could respond. "Staff Sergeant Reese, I've read your file. On paper, you're qualified. But paper doesn't mean much when bullets start flying. I need to know you can handle the pressure, the isolation of being the lone Army operator on a SEAL mission, and the weight of knowing that if you fail, good men might die during the follow-on assault." "I've handled it before, sir," Emma said quietly. Where? Cole demanded. Give me specifics. Emma hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Sir, most of my after-action reports are classified above. I have TS/SCI clearance, Staff Sergeant. So does everyone in this room. Where have you handled it before? Emma took a breath, then met his eyes. Kandahar, sir. 18 months ago, a SEAL reconnaissance team was pinned down by 6 enemy fighters in elevated positions. I eliminated all 6 targets in 12 seconds from 1,400 to 1,800 meters while under fire myself. The team exfiltrated with no casualties. The room erupted in whispered conversations. Cole's eyes widened slightly, and Dalton's hostile expression transformed into shock. That was you, the gray-haired chief said, standing up. That was the ghost operation. Emma said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. Cole stepped closer, his entire demeanor shifting. Show me your rifle, Staff Sergeant, and show me your credentials, all of them. Emma nodded and knelt beside her case once more. This time, when her fingers worked the latches, her hands were completely steady. She knew what was about to happen. She knew what they were about to see. And she knew everything was about to change. The case opened with a soft click, and Emma began to lift the lid. The lid of the rifle case swung open, revealing custom-cut foam padding that cradled the disassembled components of Emma's Barrett M82 like precious artifacts. The distinctive barrel emerged first as she lifted it from its cradle, 50 inches of matte black steel, worn smooth in specific places where her hands had gripped it thousands of times. Unlike the factory-fresh weapons issued from armories, this barrel told stories through its honest wear patterns. Emma's hands moved with the fluid confidence of a concert pianist, assembling the weapon with practiced precision. The upper receiver locked into place with a satisfying mechanical click. The bolt carrier group slid home. Each movement was economical, purposeful, free of hesitation or wasted motion. She'd assembled this rifle in pitch darkness, in sandstorms, in the back of moving vehicles. Here, in the air-conditioned briefing room with perfect lighting, it took her less than 30 seconds. The assembled Barrett M82 now lay on the conference table, and every operator in the room leaned forward to examine it. This wasn't a safe queen or a showpiece. This was a working weapon that had seen real combat. "May I?" asked the gray-haired chief, gesturing toward the rifle. Emma nodded. "Of course, Chief." He lifted it carefully, his experienced hands immediately nodding the modifications. "This isn't standard issue. You've customized the muzzle brake, replaced the bipod with an atlas, added a level to the scope mount." He squinted at the serial number etched into the receiver. "This is an early military model. You've been shooting this specific rifle for what, 4 years?" "5, Chief. It was my father's before it was mine." "Marine Scout Sniper, First Gulf War." The chief's expression shifted to something approaching reverence. He set the rifle down gently, as if it were a sacred object. "That explains the modifications. Your old man taught you well." Emma reached back into the case and withdrew a Leupold Mark V HD scope, its tube covered in tiny scratches and dings that spoke of hard use. "I use this for extreme range work. 35 power magnification, first focal plane reticle parallax adjustment that I've personally verified at every 100-meter increment from 500 to 2,500 meters." She set the scope beside the rifle, then added her ballistic computer, rangefinder, and finally, a worn leather logbook. "This contains every shot I've taken beyond 1,000 meters for the past 3 years. Environmental conditions, calculations, results. I review it before every mission." Admiral Cole picked up the logbook, flipping through pages filled with Emma's precise handwriting, columns of numbers, sketches of wind patterns, notes about bullet performance at various temperatures and altitudes. It was the journal of someone obsessed with perfection, someone who treated long-range shooting not as a job, but as a calling. "This is impressive work, Staff Sergeant," Cole admitted, though his tone still carried reservation. "But hardware and data logs don't." He stopped mid-sentence. Emma had turned to reach for her drag bag, and as she did, her uniform blouse shifted. The fluorescent lights of the briefing room caught on something metallic pinned above her name tape. Cole's eyes locked onto her chest, and his words died in his throat. The room fell silent as every operator followed the Admiral's gaze. Above Emma's name tape sat the coveted Army Sniper tab, a black and gold arc that marked her as a graduate of one of the military's most challenging schools. Below it, the Special Operations Sniper insignia, a prestigious badge that required years of advanced training and operational experience to earn. But those weren't what made Cole's face go pale. Pinned beside her standard qualification badges was a small, distinguished gold insignia that most soldiers would never recognize, but any serious long-range shooter would know instantly. The Distinguished International Shooter Badge, a sunburst design surrounding crossed rifles. It was awarded only to shooters who placed in the top 3% of international military shooting competitions. Emma had heard that fewer than 50 American soldiers currently serving had earned this recognition. Next to it sat something even rarer, the Presidential Service Badge with crossed rifles and a single star. This wasn't given for participation. It was awarded to shooters who had performed extraordinary service at the request of the President's Security Detail or Special Operations Command. The exact criteria were classified, but the badge's presence meant Emma had operated at the absolute highest levels of military precision shooting. And there was one more pin, so small and unassuming that it would be easy to miss, a silver bullet on a black backing. No official military insignia sheet listed this pin. It wasn't available through supply channels or military clothing sales. It was handmade and given only by other snipers to those who had made shots that defied belief, shots that became legend. Cole's hand trembled slightly as he set down the logbook. His eyes traced each badge and pin, his expression transforming from skepticism to shock to something approaching awe. "Dear God," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "your ghost." The word electrified the room like a lightning strike. Chairs scraped as every SEAL either stood or leaned forward. Dalton's mouth actually fell open. The gray-haired chief's eyes went wide. Even the younger operators who might not have known the full story recognized the name, Ghost, the phantom sniper whose exploits were whispered about in special operations communities across every service branch. "You're the shooter from Kandahar," Cole continued, his voice gaining strength as pieces fell into place. "The 6 kills in 12 seconds, the impossible angle through the compound wall, the shot that—" He stopped, his jaw working as emotion crossed his face. "My godson was on that SEAL team, Lieutenant James Harrington. You saved his life." Emma met his gaze steadily, neither confirming nor denying, but her silence spoke volumes. Dalton found his voice. The after-action report said the supporting sniper was an Army asset, but the name was redacted. Command said they were keeping the shooter's identity classified for security reasons. We all assumed it was Delta or some specialized unit. We had no idea it was. He gestured helplessly at Emma. "It was a staff sergeant," the gray-haired chief finished, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face, "who trained at the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School and outshot every Marine in her class. I heard about that. Instructors are still talking about it." Cole moved around the table, and for a moment Emma thought he might reprimand her for not speaking up sooner. Instead, he stopped directly in front of her and extended his hand. "Staff Sergeant Emma Reese, I owe you an apology, both as a commander who just questioned your abilities and as a man whose family you protected." His voice was thick with emotion. "That shot in Kandahar saved my godson's life. He came home to his wife and daughter because of you. I've wanted to thank the shooter who pulled off that miracle for 18 months, and here you are, standing in my briefing room while I questioned whether you could handle the mission." Emma shook his hand firmly. "You were doing your job, sir. You didn't know me. I respect that." "The mission is yours," Cole said, his tone now carrying absolute conviction. "If you want it, I won't order you to take this shot. It's dangerous, the odds are brutal, and if something goes wrong, you'll be alone on that ridge with limited exfiltration options. But if you're willing, I can't think of anyone in the entire United States military I'd rather have behind that Barrett." Emma didn't hesitate. "I'm here to work, Admiral. Let's get it done." Cole nodded, then turned to address the room. "Gentlemen, let me make something crystal clear. Staff Sergeant Reese is now the primary shooter for this operation. She will have full authority over mission planning related to the precision strike. Her requirements are our requirements. Her timeline is our timeline. Anyone have a problem with that?" Silence. Then Dalton stood and moved toward Emma, extending his hand. "Ma'am, I apologize for my earlier skepticism. It would be an honor to work with you." One by one, the other SEALs followed suit, introducing themselves, shaking her hand, their earlier hostility replaced by professional respect and genuine curiosity. The gray-haired chief was last. "Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, ma'am. I'd like to volunteer as your spotter if you'll have me. I worked as a sniper for 12 years before I moved to team leadership. I know these mountains, and I know how to read wind in terrain like this." Emma recognized the name immediately. Webb was legendary in SEAL sniper circles. "Chief, I'd be honored to work with you." Cole clapped his hands once, breaking up the introductions. "All right, we've wasted enough time. Staff Sergeant Reese, Chief Webb, you have 48 hours to plan this shot and prepare. The rest of you, let's start mission planning for the follow-on assault. We've got work to do." As the room erupted into organized chaos, maps spreading across tables and operators breaking into planning groups, Emma caught Cole's eye one more time. He nodded at her, a gesture of respect between warriors. The Barrett M82 lay on the table, no longer just a rifle but a promise. In 48 hours, it would speak with the voice of American justice across nearly a mile and a half of Afghan mountainside. And this time, everyone in the room believed it would hit its mark. The briefing room had transformed from a place of skepticism to something resembling a tactical planning center mixed with an impromptu gathering of warriors who just met a living legend. As the initial shock of Emma's revelation settled, the questions began, not challenging ones, but genuine inquiries from professionals who wanted to understand the person behind the myth. Chief Webb pulled up a chair beside Emma as she began examining the satellite imagery with fresh eyes. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, how did you end up with the Carlson ghost?" Emma looked up from the terrain analysis, a slight smile crossing her face. "I didn't pick it, Chief. After Kandahar, the SEAL team I supported started calling me that. They said I appeared out of nowhere, eliminated the threats, and disappeared before they could even thank me. The name stuck." "That undersells it," Dalton interjected, moving closer with his laptop. "I talked to Lieutenant Harrington about that operation. He said your team was positioned over a mile away, behind enemy lines when you engaged. 6 enemy fighters in hardened positions, each one requiring a different elevation and windage solution. You fired 12 rounds in 12 seconds and didn't miss once." 13 seconds, Emma corrected quietly. "One round was a follow-up confirmation shot." A young SEAL lieutenant with a baby face and intelligent eyes spoke up from across the table. "I read a classified brief about that engagement at sniper school. The instructors used it as an example of impossible shots made possible through perfect fundamentals. They didn't tell us the shooter's name, but they said the performance defied statistical probability. The odds of making 6 consecutive extreme-range shots under combat stress were calculated at less than 2%. "Statistics don't pull triggers," Emma replied, returning her attention to the maps. "Preparation and practice do." Admiral Cole, who had been listening while coordinating with higher command on a secure phone, ended his call and rejoined the group. His entire demeanor toward Emma had shifted. Where there had been doubt, Now there was the respect reserved for proven warriors. Staff Sergeant, I just got off the phone with JSOC. When I told them who they'd sent us, the operations officer asked me why I hadn't recognized your name immediately. Cole pulled up a chair and sat down, his voice taking on a storytelling quality. He proceeded to read me your actual service record, the classified portions. Would you like to know what I learned? Emma's jaw tightened slightly, but she nodded. Sir. You graduated first in your class from Army Sniper School. Not first among women. First overall, beating 73 other candidates including Rangers and Special Forces soldiers. Cole ticked points off on his fingers. You then did something almost unheard of. You attended Marine Corps Scout Sniper School as an inter-service transfer. The Marines famously don't accept outside candidates, but someone high up in the Army called in a favor. Chief Webb whistled low. Marine Scout Sniper School has a 70% attrition rate. She finished second in her class, Cole continued, behind a Marine captain with 8 years of operational experience. The instructor's comments in her file said she had the best fundamentals and most consistent performance under stress they'd observed in a decade. She was offered an instructor billet on the spot. I turned it down, Emma said quietly. I wanted to deploy, not teach. Which you did, Cole said. 3 combat tour, 73 confirmed kills, 37 of those beyond 1,000 meters. You were awarded the Bronze Star with Valor for the Kandahar operation, though the citation was classified and filed under a different name for operational security. The room had gone completely silent except for Cole's voice. Even the most experienced SEALs were impressed. Emma's record wasn't just good, it was exceptional by any standard. But what really caught my attention, Cole said, leaning forward, was a note in your file from a Delta Force commander. He requested you for a specialized operation in Syria. Do you remember that mission, Staff Sergeant? Emma's expression darkened slightly. Yes, sir, I remember. According to the file, you eliminated a high-value ISIS target from 2,240 meters in an urban environment with civilian traffic present. The shot required you to wait for a 3-second window when the target was isolated, factor in vehicle movement, and account for wind deflection caused by buildings creating urban canyons. You made the shot on your first attempt. Dalton shook his head in disbelief. Urban environments at that range are nightmares. You've got heat mirage from buildings, unpredictable wind patterns, the risk of collateral damage. Which is why I waited for the right moment, Emma interrupted gently. Patience is part of the job, Lieutenant Commander. I've spent 18 hours in a hide site waiting for a 10-second window. You don't rush perfection. A Master Chief who'd been quietly listening from the corner of the room finally spoke up. His name tape read Brennan, and his graying beard and weathered hands marked him as a veteran of countless operations. I've been a SEAL for 22 years. I've worked with snipers from every service branch, including some of the best shooters America has ever produced. The one thing they all have in common is that they're not just skilled, they're artists. They see shots others can't imagine, and they execute under pressure that would break most people. He walked over to Emma and looked her directly in the eyes. Ghost isn't just a call sign, it's a reputation. It means when you're on Overwatch, the assault team doesn't worry about long-range threats. It means the enemy never sees you coming. It means you're the angel of death who appears exactly when needed and vanishes like smoke. He extended his hand. It's an honor to have you on this operation, Staff Sergeant. Emma shook his hand, genuinely moved by the recognition from someone of Brennan's stature. The honor is mine, Master Chief. Cole stood, commanding the room's attention once more. All right, enough war stories. We have a mission to plan. Staff Sergeant Reese, Chief Webb, you're the primary element for this operation. What do you need from us? Emma turned to the satellite imagery. All business now. I need detailed meteorological data for the target valley, wind speed and direction for the past 30 days, temperature variations by time of day, barometric pressure trends. I need to know what time Nazari typically appears on that balcony and for how long. I need eyes on the target location for at least 24 hours before the shot to build a pattern. Done, Cole said. What else? Chief Webb and I need to physically recon the hide site. I don't care what the satellite images show. I need to see the actual position, test the line of sight, verify there are no obstructions the imagery might have missed. We'll need a small security element to get us there and back. Dalton nodded. My team can handle that. We'll insert you tonight under darkness. I'll need access to a range where I can verify my rifle's zero and test fire the ammunition I'll use for the shot, Emma continued. Same elevation as the target area if possible. I want to confirm my ballistic data at altitude. We have a range about 6 miles from here at similar elevation, Chief Webb offered. We can get you there this afternoon. Emma nodded, then looked directly at Admiral Cole. And sir, I need one more thing. Name it. I need everyone to stop calling me ma'am. I'm a staff sergeant, not an officer. Call me Reese, call me Ghost if you want, but I work for a living. A slight smile played at her lips. No offense to the Admiral. The room erupted in laughter, the tension finally breaking. Cole grinned, the first genuine smile Emma had seen from him. Fair enough, Reese, fair enough. As the SEALs dispersed to their various planning tasks, Chief Webb leaned over to Emma and spoke quietly. You know, the boys are going to want to hear the real story of Kandahar eventually. They're too professional to pry, but the curiosity is killing them. Emma looked up from the topographic map she was studying. Then let's make sure this mission goes perfectly, Chief. That way, they'll have a new story to tell instead. Webb chuckled. Roger that, but between you and me, what really happened that day? Emma was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant as memory took her back 18 months. 6 Taliban fighters had a SEAL recon team pinned in a compound with no escape routes. The SEALs were out of options and out of time. I had 12 rounds and 12 seconds before the enemy would overrun their position. She met Webb's eyes. So I didn't miss. When lives depend on you, failure isn't an option you allow yourself to consider. That's what makes you Ghost, Webb said softly. Not the skill, the certainty. Emma returned to her calculations, but a small part of her acknowledged the truth in his words. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being Emma Reese, the girl from Georgia who learned to shoot from her Marine father. She'd become something else, a weapon honed to perfection, a guardian angel for warriors in harm's way. In 48 hours, she'd prove it again. The Afghan sun was beginning its descent behind the mountains when Emma and Chief Webb arrived at the range 6 miles from Fob Atlas. The facility was rudimentary, sandbag berms, a few steel target frames, and a concrete shooting platform. But it sat at 8,100 feet elevation, nearly identical to where Emma would take her shot in 36 hours. Emma methodically unpacked her equipment, laying everything out with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. The Barrett M82, her loopled scope, her ballistic computer, 3 different types of ammunition she'd hand-loaded to different specifications, and her worn logbook. Chief Webb watched in silence, recognizing the ritual of a true professional. I loaded these rounds 6 months ago, Emma explained, holding up a shiny brass cartridge. Federal brass, 660-grain projectiles, specific powder charge I've tested across multiple temperature ranges. Each round is weighed to within 0.2 grains of uniformity. She loaded 5 rounds into the magazine, settled into position behind the rifle, and adjusted the bipod legs until everything felt perfect. Through the scope, a steel silhouette stood at 2,000 meters, a tiny shape shimmering in the afternoon heat. Wind, she asked Webb, who was scanning the range with a spotting scope. 3 to 4 miles per hour, right to left. Mirage indicates it's consistent across the range. Emma made minute adjustments to her scope's windage turret, her breathing slowing to almost nothing. The first shot cracked across the valley, the Barrett's distinctive report echoing off the mountains. 2 seconds later, the steel target rang with impact. "Center mass," Webb reported. "That's a hit." 4 more rounds followed over the next 3 minutes. Each one struck the target within a 6-inch group. Emma pulled back from the rifle and made notes in her logbook: temperature, wind, altitude, the exact performance of each round. "Your 0 is solid," Webb observed. "Most shooters would call that good enough." "Most shooters don't have one chance to get it right," Emma replied, loading another 5 rounds. "I want to confirm consistency across different ammunition lots." For 2 hours she fired group after group, testing different loads, verifying her ballistic data, ensuring her equipment performed flawlessly. By the time the sun touched the horizon, she'd fired 65 rounds, and her logbook was filled with new data points. Webb helped her clean the rifle as darkness settled. "You're more thorough than any shooter I've worked with. How do you deal with the pressure, knowing that one shot could make or break an entire operation?" Emma ran a bore brush through the barrel, her movements automatic. "I don't think about the pressure during the shot, Chief. I think about it now during preparation. Every calculation I make, every round I test, every variable I account for, that's where I manage the pressure. By the time I'm on target, there's nothing left to worry about. Either I did the work or I didn't." "And you always do the work." "Always." That night, Emma sat in the Tactical Operations Center, surrounded by screens displaying weather data. Master Chief Brennan had pulled meteorological information from 3 different sources: military weather stations, local Afghan weather patterns, and real-time satellite data. "The valley creates interesting wind conditions," Brennan explained, pointing to a topographic overlay showing airflow patterns. "In the morning, as the sun heats the valley floor, you get thermal updrafts. They peak between 800 and 1,000 hours, which is exactly when Nazari does his morning prayers." Emma studied the data, cross-referencing it with historical patterns. "So I'll have rising thermals pushing the bullet up and right, combined with the natural wind deflection. What's the consistency day to day?" "Pretty reliable. Afghanistan has stable weather this time of year. We've had clear conditions for 3 weeks straight." She made calculations in her notebook, building a comprehensive picture of what the bullet would encounter during its 3-second flight. Coriolis effect, wind deflection, thermal currents, altitude-induced air density changes, the downward angle, every factor analyzed and quantified. Admiral Cole entered the operations center near midnight, finding Emma still working. "Reese, you've been at this for 18 hours. Get some rest." "Almost done, sir. I want to finalize my wind map before the morning reconnaissance." Cole pulled up a chair beside her. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, 2 professionals who understood the weight of responsibility. "My godson called me today," Cole said quietly. "He heard through the grapevine that you were here. He wanted me to tell you that his daughter just turned 1 year old. He got to see her first birthday because of you." Emma's hands paused on her calculator. "I'm glad he made it home, sir." "He told me something else. He said that when everything went to hell in Kandahar, when they were certain they weren't getting out, they heard your rifle. 6 shots, 6 kills, and suddenly the impossible became survivable." Cole met her eyes. "He said it was like having a guardian angel nobody could see." "I was just doing my job, Admiral." "No," Cole said firmly. "You were doing something most people can't even imagine. Tomorrow, you're going to do it again, and another high-value target will be eliminated, and more Americans will come home alive because of your skills. That's not just a job, Reese. That's a calling." At 300 hours, Emma, Chief Webb, and Dalton's SEAL team loaded into 2 MRAPs for the reconnaissance mission. They drove without lights through mountain passes, night vision turning the world into shades of green. 2 hours later, they reached the ridge that would serve as Emma's hide site. She moved forward with Webb, both of them low-crawling the final 100 meters to avoid silhouetting against the sky. As dawn broke, Emma positioned herself exactly where she'd take the shot and looked through her rangefinder. The target compound sat across the valley, 2,387 meters away according to the laser rangefinder. Through her scope, she could see the balcony where Nazari would appear. She studied every detail, the railing height, the shadows cast by the building, the sight lines, potential obstructions. "Line of sight is clear," she murmured to Webb. "The angle is steep but manageable. I'll need to hold approximately 18 mils low to account for the downward slope." Webb scanned with his spotting scope, memorizing landmarks for wind reading. "See those trees at 800 meters, and the dust near that compound at 1,500. Those'll be our wind indicators during the shot." They spent 3 hours on that ridge, Emma absorbing every detail, building a mental map of the terrain. She watched how the light changed, how the wind shifted as the sun rose, how the thermal currents developed exactly as the weather data predicted. By the time they returned to base, Emma had everything she needed. The variables were known. The calculations were complete. The rifle was zeroed. All that remained was the execution. Back at Fob Atlas, she found Admiral Cole waiting. "How does it look?" "It's a difficult shot, sir," Emma replied honestly. "But it's makeable. I'll need perfect conditions and a bit of luck, but I can do it." Cole studied her face, seeing the quiet confidence of a warrior who'd done the work. "I believe you. Mission is greenlit for tomorrow morning. Wheels up at 200, you'll be in position by 500. Nazari appears between 7:30 and 7:45 for morning prayers. That's your window." Emma nodded. "We'll be ready." That evening she sat on her bunk, disassembling and cleaning her rifle one final time. Each component was inspected, verified, and reassembled with loving care. This weapon was more than metal and mechanics. It was an extension of her will, a tool of precision that had never failed her. Chief Webb found her there, still working in the dim light. "Get some sleep, Ghost. Tomorrow's a big day." "In a minute, Chief. I just want to run through my checklist one more time." Webb smiled knowingly. He'd worked with enough snipers to understand that this final preparation wasn't about the equipment. It was about the mental game, the ritual that put a shooter in the right headspace for the impossible. "You know," Webb said, "I've spotted for a lot of shooters, but I've never been more confident going into a mission than I am right now. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm honored to be your spotter." Emma looked up, genuine appreciation in her eyes. "The honor is mine, Chief. Let's go make history." As Webb left, Emma returned to her rifle, her hands moving through familiar motions. In less than 8 hours, she'd be on that ridge. In 10 hours, she'd look through her scope at a man who'd killed 17 American soldiers. And when the moment came, when everything aligned and the impossible shot presented itself, Emma Reese, Ghost, would not miss. She never did. The darkness before dawn was absolute as Emma and Chief Webb moved into position on the ridge. They'd infiltrated under night vision, Dalton's SEAL team providing security along the approach route. Now, with the assault team positioned 3 kilometers away waiting for her signal, Emma settled into the small depression she'd identified during reconnaissance. The hide site was barely large enough for 2 people. Rocky ground, sparse vegetation, and a perfect line of sight across the valley to Nazari's compound. Emma arranged her equipment with methodical precision. The Barrett M82 on its bipod, her ballistic computer within easy reach, her rangefinder, and the hand-loaded ammunition she'd tested yesterday. Chief Webb positioned himself slightly behind and to her left, his spotting scope already scanning the valley. "Time is 5:12, he whispered. "We're 2 hours and 18 minutes from the expected window." Emma nodded, settling in behind her rifle. The waiting began. Through her scope, the compound was a dark silhouette against the lightening sky. As dawn broke slowly across the Afghan mountains, Details emerged: the balcony where Nazari would appear, the guards patrolling the perimeter, the vehicles parked in the courtyard. Everything matched the intelligence photographs perfectly. "Range?" Emma asked softly. Webb activated the laser rangefinder, painting the balcony. 2,387 meters. Confirmed. Emma's fingers moved across her ballistic computer, inputting the exact distance. The device calculated the bullet drop. At this range, the .50 caliber round would fall nearly 40 feet during its flight. She'd need to aim that far above her target, trusting physics and mathematics to bring the bullet back down to the point of impact. Temperature is 62 degrees, humidity 43%, barometric pressure 25.84, Webb reported, reading from his Kestrel weather meter. Wind is light, 3 miles per hour from the southwest. Emma made minute adjustments to her scope's elevation and windage turrets. Each click represented a small change in the point of impact, and at this distance, a single click could mean the difference between a hit and a miss. The sun rose higher, warming the valley floor. Through her scope, Emma watched the thermal mirage begin to dance, heat rising from the ground, creating distortion that would affect her bullet's path. She'd accounted for this in her calculations, but she watched it carefully, reading the invisible currents of air like a sailor reading wind on water. 6:30 hours, 1 hour to go. Emma's breathing had slowed to a meditative rhythm. Her heart rate was 52 beats per minute, the product of years of mental conditioning and physical control. In this state, she could time her shot between heartbeats, eliminating even that tiny pulse of movement. "Movement on the balcony," Webb said suddenly. "Guards checking the area." Emma watched through her scope as 2 Taliban fighters stepped onto the balcony, scanning the surrounding mountains with binoculars. They looked directly toward her position, but she and Webb were invisible, camouflaged, motionless, professional ghosts on a barren ridge. The guards retreated inside. 7:15 hours. "Wind picking up," Webb reported. 5 miles per hour still southwest. Thermals are building as predicted. Emma adjusted her windage 2 clicks right, accounting for the increasing wind. At 2,387 meters, that 5-mile-per-hour breeze would push her bullet nearly 3 feet off course. Combined with the thermal currents rising from the valley, she needed to aim right and slightly low, trusting the math. "You good?" Webb asked quietly. "Good," Emma confirmed. Her voice was calm, almost flat, the sound of a mind completely focused on a single task. 7:28 hours. The balcony door opened. Emma's finger moved to the trigger guard, ready but not yet committed. A guard stepped out, looked around, then stepped back inside. False alarm. 7:34 hours. The door opened again. This time, 3 men emerged, 2 guards flanking a central figure. Emma's scope was already centered on the doorway, tracking the movement. As the central figure stepped into the light, she recognized him from the intelligence photographs. Khalid Nazari. "Positive ID," Webb breathed. "Center target is Nazari." Emma's crosshairs settled on his chest. He was wearing traditional Afghan clothing, standing at the balcony railing, facing east for morning prayers. The guards positioned themselves on either side but slightly back, giving her a clear shot. "Wind is steady 4 miles per hour southwest," Webb reported, his voice barely a whisper. "Thermals are consistent, range unchanged. You have the green light." Emma's breathing slowed further. In, out, in, out. Her entire world narrowed to the crosshairs dancing slightly on Nazari's center mass. She made a final mental calculation: bullet drop, wind drift, Coriolis effect, the downward angle, temperature, air density. Every variable she'd spent 2 days analyzing crystallized into a single aiming point. She placed her crosshairs 18 mils above and 2 mils right of Nazari's chest, trusting that gravity and wind would bring the bullet back to center. Through the scope, he appeared impossibly small, a tiny figure across a vast distance. Nazari raised his hands to begin his prayers. Emma's finger took up the trigger slack, 3 pounds of pressure, then 4. The Barrett's trigger broke clean at 4.5 pounds. The world exploded. The rifle's reculation drove back into Emma's shoulder with massive force, but she was already recovering, staying in the scope to watch the impact. The distinctive crack of the .50 caliber round echoed across the valley, but the sound would reach the compound long after the bullet did. For 3.2 seconds, time suspended. The bullet crossed nearly 1.5 miles, traveling at over 2,700 feet per second. It arced upward, reached its apex, then descended toward the target, shedding velocity but maintaining its deadly trajectory. Wind pushed it right. Gravity pulled it down. The Earth's rotation affected it microscopically. All of Emma's calculations, all her preparation, all her years of training compressed into those 3.2 seconds. Through the scope, Emma watched Nazari's chest explode in a spray of red mist. The impact drove him backward off his feet. The guards froze in confusion, unable to process what had just happened. One of them looked down at Nazari's body, then around wildly, searching for a threat they couldn't see. "Target down," Emma reported, her voice utterly calm. "Confirmed kill." "Holy," Webb whispered, awe in his voice. "That was a perfect hit, center mass." Emma was already working the Barrett's bolt, chambering another round, scanning for additional targets. But the compound had erupted in chaos. Guards ran in every direction. Men shouted. Someone fired a weapon blindly into the air, having no idea where the shot had originated. "Assault team, this is Overwatch," Webb transmitted on the radio. "Primary target is down. Compound is in disarray. You are clear to begin assault." 3 kilometers away, Dalton's SEAL team launched their attack. They'd been waiting for Emma's shot, and now they moved with practiced precision, fast-roping from helicopters onto the compound's roof, breaching doors, securing the building. With Nazari dead and the defenders in chaos, the SEALs swept through the compound like a surgical strike. Emma kept her scope on the balcony, providing overwatch. If any threat emerged, she was ready to engage again. But the fight was already over. The Taliban fighters, leaderless and confused, either surrendered or died in brief, violent confrontations. "Compound secure," Dalton's voice came over the radio. "Secondary targets captured. We've got intelligence materials. Excellent work, Overwatch." Emma finally pulled back from her scope, her body releasing tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Chief Webb was grinning at her, shaking his head in amazement. "That was the most beautiful shot I've ever seen," he said. 2,387 meters, downhill angle, thermal currents, wind, and you put it center mass on the first round. Ghost, you're a legend." Emma began safing her weapon, her movements automatic. "It was a team effort, Chief. Your wind calls were perfect." "Don't be modest. I've spotted for dozens of shooters. That shot was all you." They began breaking down their equipment, preparing to exfiltrate. Below, the SEAL team was loading captured prisoners and intelligence materials onto helicopters. The mission, months of planning, days of preparation, and 3.2 seconds of execution, was complete. As they moved off the ridge, Emma allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Khalid Nazari would never kill another American soldier. The families of his victims would have justice. And somewhere, a SEAL team was coming home safely because she'd done her job. The Barrett M82 case bumped against her back as she walked, already thinking about the debrief, the after-action report, the next mission. Ghost had struck again. The Black Hawk touched down at Fob Atlas just after noon, rotor wash kicking up dust across the landing zone. Emma stepped off with Chief Webb, the Barrett case slung over her shoulder, her uniform dusty from hours in the mountain hide site. She was exhausted but alert, running on the adrenaline that always followed a successful mission. Admiral Cole stood waiting at the edge of the helipad, along with what appeared to be the entire task force. As Emma approached, Cole stepped forward and, to her surprise, began to clap. The sound was taken up by every SEAL present, a thunderous applause that echoed across the base. Emma stopped, genuinely surprised by the reception. She wasn't accustomed to recognition. Snipers typically worked in shadows, their successes measured in lives saved rather than medals earned. Cole's expression was a mixture of respect, gratitude, and something else: humility. He waited until the applause died down, then addressed not just Emma, but the entire assembled task force. "Gentlemen, gather around. What happened today deserves to be acknowledged." His voice carried the authority of command but also the warmth of genuine appreciation. 48 hours ago, I stood in a briefing room and questioned whether Staff Sergeant Emma Reese belonged on this mission. I looked at her uniform, her rank, her service branch, and I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. He paused, meeting the eyes of his SEALs. "I almost made the biggest mistake of my career. I almost turned away one of the finest shooters I've ever encountered because I judged her by everything except what actually matters: her skill, her dedication, and her courage under fire." Cole turned to face Emma directly. "This morning, Staff Sergeant Reese made a shot that most marksmen would consider impossible. 2,387 meters across difficult terrain, in variable wind conditions, with thermal currents, at a steep downward angle. One shot, one kill. The target was eliminated, the follow-on assault was successful, and we captured 2 additional high-value targets along with significant intelligence materials. Most importantly, every member of the assault team came home alive." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small case. Opening it, he revealed the task force's commemorative coin, a rare honor given only for exceptional valor and performance. "Staff Sergeant Emma Reese, on behalf of this task force and the United States Naval Special Warfare Command, I present you with this coin in recognition of extraordinary marksmanship and professionalism in combat operations." Emma accepted the coin, holding it carefully. The weight of it felt significant, not just the metal but what it represented: acceptance, recognition, respect earned through performance. "Thank you, Admiral," she said quietly, "but I was just doing my job. Chief Webb's wind calls were perfect, the assault team executed flawlessly, and the intelligence preparation was thorough. This was a team effort." "That's exactly what makes you exceptional," Cole replied. "You understand that no one succeeds alone, but make no mistake, that shot was yours and it was magnificent." Dalton stepped forward, his earlier skepticism completely erased. "Ma'am, Reese, my team wants you to know that we've worked with a lot of snipers over the years. What you did today was the best Overwatch support we've ever received. You gave us the confidence to execute our assault knowing that you had our backs." Master Chief Brennan added his voice. "In 22 years as a SEAL, I've learned that capability doesn't care about gender, service branch, or rank. It only cares about skill and heart. You've got both in abundance, Ghost. It's been an honor." One by one, the SEALs approached Emma, shaking her hand, some asking questions about the shot, others simply offering their respect. The initial resistance had transformed into genuine professional admiration. As the group began to disperse for the formal debrief, Emma noticed movement at the edge of the crowd. 3 young soldiers, 2 women and a man, all wearing army uniforms, stood watching with expressions of awe and inspiration. The older of the 2 women, a specialist with infantry insignia, gathered her courage and approached. "Staff Sergeant Reese," she said hesitantly, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to say something. I'm trying to get into sniper school and everyone keeps telling me women can't handle the physical demands, that we don't belong in precision shooting roles." Her voice strengthened. "Seeing what you did today, hearing how you earned respect from Navy SEALs through pure skill, it means everything to me. You proved it's possible." Emma studied the young specialist, seeing herself years ago determined, facing skepticism, willing to work twice as hard to prove herself. What's your name, Specialist? Martinez, Staff Sergeant. Specialist Martinez, let me tell you something important. You will face doubt. You will encounter people who judge you before you've fired a single shot. Some will question whether you belong, whether you can handle the pressure, whether you have what it takes. Emma's voice was firm but encouraging. Don't let their doubts become your limitations. Work harder than everyone else. Master your fundamentals. Be so undeniably skilled that your performance speaks louder than their prejudices. And remember, you're not doing this to prove anything to them. You're doing it because you're capable, because you're called to serve, and because the mission needs the best people regardless of what they look like. Martinez's eyes glistened with emotion. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. I won't let you down. You won't let yourself down, Emma corrected gently. That's what matters. 2 hours later, after the formal debrief and mission documentation, Emma sat in the quiet of the equipment room, cleaning her rifle one final time before packing for departure. Her orders were already cut. She'd be on a transport back to Fort Benning within 12 hours. Chief Webb found her there, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered her one and sat down on a nearby equipment crate. You know, in all my years working with snipers, I've never seen anyone prepare as thoroughly as you did. That shot wasn't luck. It was mastery. Emma accepted the coffee gratefully. My father used to say that amateurs practice until they get it right. Professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. I just try to be a professional. Your old man taught you well. Marine Scout sniper, right? First Gulf War. He died 6 years ago, cancer from burn pit exposure. Emma ran her hand along the Barrett's receiver. This was his rifle. Every time I shoot it, I feel like he's still teaching me. Webb nodded respectfully. He'd be proud of what you've become. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 warriors who'd shared something significant, a mission executed perfectly, a bond forged through professional excellence. What's next for you? Webb asked. Emma smiled slightly. Whatever mission comes next, Chief. There's always another target, another team that needs overwatch, another impossible shot waiting to be made. Ghost never rests. Not while there's work to be done. As the sun set over Fob Atlas, Emma boarded the helicopter that would begin her journey home. Admiral Cole personally saw her off, shaking her hand one final time. Reese, if I ever have another mission requiring precision shooting, you'll be my first call. You've earned that. I'm always available, Admiral, anytime, anywhere. The helicopter lifted off, and Emma watched the base shrink below. Somewhere down there, Specialist Martinez was probably studying sniper manuals, preparing for her own journey. Other young soldiers were seeing what was possible when skill and determination overcame prejudice. The Barrett M82 case rested securely beside her, containing the weapon that had spoken with authority across nearly 1.5 miles of Afghan mountainside. The mission was complete. Justice had been delivered. American warriors would come home because she'd done her job. Emma Reese, Staff Sergeant, Army Sniper, the legend known as Ghost, closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new opportunities to prove that excellence knows no boundaries. But tonight she'd earned a moment of peace. The helicopter banked east, carrying her toward home, while behind her the Afghan mountains held their secrets and their stories of the phantom sniper who appeared like a ghost and vanished like smoke, leaving only precision and justice in her wake. The end.
Vedere? Davi, sali su quel cazzo di aereo. Lo so, infatti voleva passare a prendermi stamattina. Sai che figata che sarebbe stato? Ma te l'ho detto, prima o poi lo facciamo votato. Quando hai tempo e quando riusciamo ad organizzarci. Mi spiace che mi hai chiamato solo stamattina, me lo dicevi gli altri giorni, c'ero. Ero gasato, ho visto il recupero dell'equipaggio, le urla di gioia degli... sì, io sono arrivato solamente quando sono scesi in mare, che poi li hanno recuperati, poi ho tolto. Poi c'è stata una conferenza, la conferenza